At the core and all around each human being is the self. It's effervescent, it's glowing, it's present, it's creative, right? It's filled with presence and possibility that is bigger than and thus transcends language, right? It is the greatest joy to touch the self, to meet the self in another person from the position of self, right? So that's the golden. It's also easy. However, the human ego exists within a cultural system, a cult of sorts, a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And we can look at a system as an imperfect refraction of the sphere. Right? The sphere is too complicated. It's an infinite number of lines, of dots, of dimensions. It's just too big to grasp. It's in the unconscious. And so we create a model of reality, a model of the sphere, of the one, that is simple enough for an ego, to understand. Right? So then we have an I that attaches itself to that system, to that identity. We have an identity, a cultural identity, an individual identity. And in that identity, in that refraction, in that system, we have a remainder, an outlaw, an outcast, an enemy, and anomalous data. And it's out here, right? You see that between the one, between reality and the system, right? The system introduces straight lines, and they clip off part of the psyche, part of the possibility, part of the probability field. And out here, outside the system, outside the model, is the outlaw, the outcast, the rebel, the black sheep, right? The devil, right? Out there is the anomalous data, the data that does not fit within the model. And if you look carefully enough at any system, including scientific theories, there is always anomalous data. Sometimes it's in the unknown, right? The unknown, and the unknown unknown is the largest portion of reality. Right? Most of what's out there we do not know, and we do not know that we do not know. We like to extrapolate from what we think we know, that everything out there that we don't know and don't know that we don't know must be this, because this is what it just must be, right? Gravity is working in this area, and this area, and this area. It must be working everywhere. And, you know, these are reasonable hypotheses, but most of reality is out there beyond the area we can see, right? You got this little box here, and then there's the stuff we can't see and must imagine, must hypothesize. So the job of the I, the ego I, is to maintain the system, right? So you have the government. Their job is to maintain the governmental system. You have the ego I, a microcosm, a fractal representation. The ego I's job is to maintain the identity. The I identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that the I attaches itself. the identity does not fully make sense, right? It doesn't quite fit. It's not optimal. But the I's job is to maintain something that it can grasp, something that it can understand, which means a simple model, simple enough that we think we know what we're doing. However, the simpler the model, the more outcasts there are. This is a not too bad model, right? Because we've got lots of the psyche, lots of reality inside the model, right? So it would be a simpler model to have what's called a black and white model, right? This is good, that's bad, right? So this has 50% outcasts. Whenever you divide the one into two, into any polarity, you get two equal halves. So one of the illusions in language, one of the equal halves is the good half and the bad half. Right? Now, you know right off the bat that this is a misunderstanding of reality. Because if you take the Earth and cut it in half and try to find the good half of the Earth and the bad half, the Earth stops functioning ecologically the moment you cut it in half and the molten lava starts spraying out into space and the gravitational spin becomes wonky and the rivers start pouring out into the half and erupting in the molten core. You say, no. The problem is cutting it in half, right? There's not a good half and a bad half of a planet, right? Right? You take a human being and you say, okay, right, we have a good part and a bad part. So let's just cut the human being in half and we'll dispose of the bad part and keep the good part. But any fool knows that you cut a body in half and both halves stop working, right? And you say that, I'm going to take anything aggressive and outward and creative and alive, and that's very inappropriate, right? So we're going to cut that off, right? And then we'll just have the complete self-effacement and timid, do I have the right to breathe in, right? I know I have the right to give, right? But do I have the right to breathe in anything, to take anything? Right? That's so crass, right? Well, exactly what are you going to breathe out if you don't breathe something in, right? These polarities function as ecologies. And when you cut a polarity in half, right, you always have two equal halves. So you can synergize with them, or you can put them into battle with one another. But who wins a tug of war that is exactly equal, right? Nobody, right? You just spend a lot of energy, right, moving back and forth. So you have a lot of wasted energy in simple models of reality because you pretend that this is all unwelcome and an outcast, but you are in fact dependent on it, right? Even your physical existence today is dependent on the reprehensible rapes, incests, drunkenness, stupidity of your ancestors, right? Sometime in the last 1,000 generations of your family, one of your generations, one of your ancestors was raped, which gave birth to the next ancestor, who gave birth to the next ancestor and the next ancestor who was your father. In other words, if that rape didn't happen, you don't exist. If that drunken, I should never have had that one night stand hadn't happened, right? If the alpha monkey didn't beat up the little monkey, right, you didn't happen. So it's not a, right? So it's a difficult job to extract whatever it is that is bad from reality. Right? Because what is good, like that sweet, kind child came out of being the victim of massive trauma and this and that and the other, and had so much empathy for other trauma survivors. And we say, we hate the trauma, right? We hate it. Just get rid of it. But look at this sweet example. That's what we need, right? And it's very much like the protocol we use in horticulture, right? Down here you have lots of mud and manure. We hate that, right? But in that mud and manure are roots. We don't like roots and we don't like mud and manure. But out of the roots comes a stem. The stem has leaves and, we'll go along with it. They're pristine leaves. The leaves are clean, right? But they're being fed by the manure. But what we really like is this beautiful flowers. I get that mud out of the house and this, I want the flower. I want the flower. I hate the mud, right? So of course, being a good fundamentalist, you cut off, right? You cut off the plant. You throw the mud in the garbage and the roots in the garbage, right? And the flower withers, right? And that's kind of what we do whenever we have simple, really simple, black and white models of reality. But even as we get more complex, right? We go to a triangular model of reality. It's a little bit less waste, a little bit more balance, a lot more strength, right? We get rid of that, we do a 4-point. The more complex and symmetrical our model, the less waste, the less outcasts there are that are outside of the model, right? But whenever you create a model, you create outcasts. And the job of the outcast is to tear down the model that is excluding them. The job of the government, the job of the ego is to fight with its own people, itself, right? What's the ego doing when it's saying, I'm this type of person, I'm not that type of person? The ego is fighting with itself, its own possibility field. It's the job of the I, the identity, to create a coherent pattern, right, that makes sense to the I. And in doing so, it excludes all the parts that aren't in the pattern. And it's those parts' job to sign and say, wait, what about me? What about me? Right? And then it's the government and the ego's job to say, you don't exist, you don't matter, right? The pattern matters, right? We've got to keep the structure of our system, of our identity alive. So they go to war with themselves, right? It's a civil war, right? In each individual, in each culture, it's a civil war. I don't want to feel my hurt. I don't want to look at my hate. I don't want to look at that. Like, I just want to be pleasant and sweet. Get away, you're ruining my identity, right? You go away, right? Go away, I don't want to just talk to you, right? You're ruining my identity, right? And here I am, the way that I want to be. And of course, the more we exclude, deny, pretend that these things don't exist, the bigger they get. The more energy we put into suppressing them, the bigger the backlash, right? And so eventually what happens, right, is the power grabbing nature of government and identity just frenetically becomes more and more paranoid at anything that's softening the edges of its illusionary system. It becomes more and more extreme, and the more extreme it becomes, the more extreme the outcasts, the more extreme the minorities become, until they overthrow the system or are included by the system, right? And it's a gradual process. We're not going to let black people, right? We're not going to let black people into vote and all that. We're not going to even give them the constitutional right to be human, right? Right? And that creates problems over time, right? And it's, okay, fine. Right, but we're not going to let women vote, right? We're not going to let women vote, right? We're not going to do that. Okay, fine. We're not going to let homosexuals exist. Okay, fine. You know, what are we going to do, right? They just keep having sex. Okay, right? But you know, that's it, right? Right, transgender. Oh gosh, you know where's the line, right? The identity, the system, the government. Its job is to maintain order, to define the line so that it doesn't descend into chaos. I have no idea about anything. It doesn't fit together. I can't function. I'm overwhelmed. I'm terrified of the unknown. I don't know what to do. I'm paralyzed, right? Says the I, without a system, without identity. I need to know who I am. I need to know who I am, right? And so there's a dialogue, a violent, oppressive dialogue, or an empathic dialogue. I don't really want to lock you out, but the capitalist system says if you don't pay the rent, you can't sleep here. But it's an empty room. It's just the system, right? That's the way it is. If I let you sleep there, then the next person will want to sleep there without paying. Then I won't have any money to fix the roof. It's got to stop somewhere. So yes, it's an empty room. Yes, you're out there in the cold. Yes, I care about you, but not enough to blur the system lines. I'm not going to let you in. I'm going to say, I hope you find a place under a good bridge, right? But I'm not going to let you in. My job is to maintain the system, right? And to know where the line is. And the line is no pay, no stay, right? That's the line. Clear. Yeah, but you let okay, no stay, no pay except for my best friend, right? You let your best friend stay there, right? But that's it, right? You're not my best friend. Right? Well, what is a friend? Well, we're not going into that. Go sleep under a bridge. And so the system is maintained, and we have peace. It's like, I know who I am. Right? The government, the I, its job is to define a system and then maintain the system despite the obvious evidence of its imperfect nature, of its cruelty, of its inefficiency. It makes no sense, right? We spend more energy getting a permit for something than doing it. It makes no sense. But that is the system. We are a system of law, and the law was passed. The law says you have to get a permit, right? And the law does not say the permit agency has to be intelligent, right? We forgot that bit, right? So you are going to spend 70% of your energy getting a permit for something that takes 30% of your energy, and that we all know is a good thing. Everyone knows, but it's the system. Just do the fucking stupid, crappy, insane stuff that the system says, because what else? What else is there without that system? That's the job of the bureaucrats, of the managers. Now the thing is, right, there's a continuum of competency. The higher the competency, the lower the pain in a population. Nobody wants to feel chronically bad. Everyone wants to feel sustainably better. The variable is competency. It's not energy. The universe is filled with an unlimited supply, right? An unlimited supply of energy, right? If we had spent all of the time and money that we spent going to war in the last 100 years as a species, if we had spent that on housing, feeding, and giving medicine to every child and person alive, we would have a surplus of money and a tremendously enjoyable existence with relatively low levels of fear. Instead, we spent trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars killing each other, researching ways to kill each other, researching and stockpiling weapons to kill each other, creating strategies for what if they tried to kill us. We did that. Right? Now that's competency. The energy is there. It's just how do you use it? Right? A highly competent species puts all that energy into research and development of space exploration, right? And we would already have a terraformed Mars in the last 100 years if we put, let's say, the $100 trillion that we spent on war and espionage and all that, we just spent a third of that terraforming Mars. But that would require a higher level of intelligence than the intelligence that we actually have, right? So and then there would be no question of population expansion, right? We would actually need people, right? We'd need more people, right? And maybe we'd be off at another planet, or maybe we would have created a space-time technology by that time, right? It just depends, right? So there's enough space in the universe for a growing human population. There's certainly enough energy, and the possibility field is big enough to include anything you can dream and more. But how competent are you and I to access that energy, to reduce unnecessary suffering? How competent? That is the question, right? The amount of suffering, chronic suffering in the world, is a direct corollary. It measures our competence, our intelligence, right? 20% people are depressed. Not ecstatic, depressed. Like 1% are ecstatic. 1% of the time, right? Well, so that we have 1% of people highly competent 1% of the time. How many people have ecstatic sex on a daily basis? The body is capable of it. There's no shortage of people, but there is a shortage of intelligence. There's a shortage of competency. Are you willing to develop the competency? You're willing to go into the unknown? Because to develop competency, we have to change. And in order to change, we have to liquefy our identity. We have to stop being so dogmatic and defending the identity, and we actually have to liquefy it. We have to explore, right? We have to play around with the identity, right? Let's do it this way, this way, this way, and this way. And then this week we'll leave out this bit, right? And next week, let's change. Oh, it's too confusing. You were this person last week. Oh my gosh, I'm so scared of the unknown, right? So we are largely in a relationship with what's called managers. The ego has protectors, managers, whose job is to stop certain things from happening, to make sure that things don't liquefy and change, to intimidate, to block, to keep people out from seeing the levers that would allow things to change so that things stay the same. And the managers, the defenders, the protectors, they're always cruel, well-meaning, right? That's my job, right? They're always cruel, ignorant, rarely understand the full picture. But their job is to keep change out of the system, right? And so that's the way that works. And yet the greatest joy in life is always to meet another self inside that protective shell of managers and protectors and bureaucrats that are designed to keep the system running. The system that creates division, but is necessary for some sense of identity.